Perfect, perfect. Welcome, everybody. You are in the right spot for Cal State Northridge's virtual tour of the world's oceans. You're going to notice that we don't have our interpreter, Caitlin, today. She's out sick, but that live captioning link is on the bottom of the chat. So please feel free to use that otter.ai if you need it. And I'll keep spamming that as people come in. Perfect, perfect. While we wait one more minute for the rest of the folks to trickle in, I'm going to put up one of our old trusty handy dandy polls. Today, since we're talking about the ocean, what ways have you interacted or explored the ocean? Multiple choice, so you can pick a whole bunch of stuff if you want.
Host and panelists can't vote.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, Chris.
That's all right.
All right. We got more scuba divers than expected so far.
All right.
We'll do 20 more seconds and then we'll share the results. We got a free diver on there too. Awesome. All right. 5, 4, get your votes in. 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and share those results. The vast majority of us love hanging out on the beach. We got quite a few snorkelers, a handful of scuba divers, and we got our one free diving expert. That wasn't you, was it, Milburn?
Okay. No, couldn't answer.
And we got some surfers too. Awesome. So a whole bunch of people that like to interact with the ocean and want to learn some more. So it's 12:02. Let's go ahead and get started as I put those links one more time. Hey everybody, my name is Chris Whitesides and I'm coming at you from California State University Northridge Associated Students Outdoor Adventure Program for what feels like our 100th virtual tour that we've done this summer. But today we are super lucky to be joined by explorer extraordinaire Chris Milburn, who I was lucky enough to meet and work with during my undergrad experience at UCLA. Chris went on to do way cooler things than me, Chris did, as he became a hyperbaric technician, which is like scuba diving medicine. And as he got super into scuba diving, from there, he was kind of recognized and awarded by the Rolex Underwater Society Foundation, which is a massive, most people haven't really heard of it, but it's a massive scuba diving network of professionals, of researchers, of just people that love the sport, want to protect the oceans and learn more about the oceans. And from that experience where Chris was awarded this Rolex Explorer of the Year, or what's the title?
The North American Rolex Scholar is what they called it.
That's way back.
I know.
Chris went all over, explored almost every ocean, did a ton of caves, did almost every kind of scuba diving you can imagine, and now has kind of rolled that into doing 3D mapping or digital mapping of different places above water and underwater, including a recent expedition to Petra, the ancient site of Petra, and a couple months ago he just got back from Mount Everest, where he was doing 3D mapping with National Geographic, has the yellow jacket with the Nat Geo logo. So super cool and super happy to have you here. So thank you for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. So glad to be here.
So our quick little housekeeping with Zoom before we jump into Google Earth for the next 20 minutes, where we'll jump around a whole bunch of 360-degree shots underwater. But please feel free to use that chat function on the bottom gray ribbon of options to chat with us. Or if you want to fill up that Q&A, I'll try and deliver as many of those Q&A questions that you have, and we'll have Chris answer them live as we go. But with that being said, and our last thing, please, please, please do check out those links that we have. I am far dumber than Chris Milburn, nowhere near a professional scientist, biologist. I think I've scuba diving 5 times, love snorkeling and worked as a snorkel instructor, but by far not a scientist. So please do follow up on some of these topics and research on your own. And again, that last link that we shared is to Otter AI, our live captioning service. So I do apologize for not having Caitlin here, but she is out sick. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. And our usual starting spot, which is of just big old blue planet Earth, which is often, if you've seen a bunch of documentaries, referred to as the blue planet, because the vast majority of our planet is made up of water. 71% of our planet is water, from the Pacific Ocean, the Southern Ocean down here, the Indian Ocean as we swing around to India, 5 major oceans, which kind of capture about 96.5% of the Earth's water is held and stored in those salty oceans. But for as much of our planet that is ocean and made up of salt water, we still don't know a whole lot about our planet's oceans. It's kind of like another planet within our planet that we're just starting to explore and learn more about. But it does hold the keys to a lot of, or may hold a lot of answers to problems that we as people face, or challenges that our planet faces. So let's go ahead and jump into our first shot as we go just south of the Great Barrier Reef here in Byron Bay. And for a lot of this presentation, I'm going to be saying the word biodiversity. So Chris Milburn, what the heck does biodiversity mean?
So biodiversity is going to be kind of the variety and breadth of different types of species in life that are in any given ecosystem. So when we talk about biodiversity, we don't just talk about the amounts of animals that there are in a place. There can be tons and tons of wildlife in a given spot, both, flora and fauna, which kind of means plants and animals, right? But having lots of different kinds of plants and animals usually means that it's a healthier ecosystem, because all of those different plants and animals are kind of in flux. Some of them are a little bit more successful in the summer, some are a little bit better in the winter, and it keeps life and energy moving throughout an ecosystem. If you only have one animal, even if there's tons of them, if one problem happens that makes that animal not able to survive there anymore, everything dies out. So you are always looking for biodiversity, and coral reefs like this one are one of the most biodiverse places on the planet.
So then my next question as we move to our next slide is what is my next slide? Sorry about that. And my next question is, how are we exploring that biodiversity? Like what is scuba diving, and how does that help us check all this stuff out?
So scuba diving, just about everybody, here you go, here's somebody right there. Just about everybody's kind of seen pictures or video of scuba diving and scuba divers, but what it really is you've got a tank on your back, and a lot of people think that it's oxygen, but it's actually not. It's almost always just air, right? So the same air that we breathe, but instead it's pressurized down inside of that tank, because as you go farther underwater and you get deeper and deeper, the pressure is actually going to go up and up and up as all of that water pushes down on you. And so to fight that, we have to put the air inside of the big metal tank to hold that pressure. And then we let the pressure out slowly and regularly into what's called a regulator that you breathe out of there. And what that allows us to do is be underwater for much, much longer than humans really could for most of history until very recently. And that's allowed us to explore more of the ocean in the last 50, 60 years than the entirety of human history before then. So it's a really exciting time actually to see underwater and to be underwater.
All right, the tech is always changing, right? What the heck is this guy or girl holding on to? What is this?
So that's a scooter, actually. No. So believe it or not, there are now underwater scooters that you can hold on to, and it's like a little propeller, and then that whole tube in front is all batteries. It's just batteries the whole way. And it allows people to go much, much faster underwater and conserve effort. So the more that you breathe, the more of your air on your back that you use up. So the quicker you can go without kicking, without swimming really hard against current, the more time you can spend under the water. So it's very popular now to have those scooters, but they're very expensive. So you don't see everybody with that.
Good to know. Next time I go to the Maldives, which is just south of India, maybe I'll see if I can get a scooter. We're going to go ahead and jump from the Maldives over to the coast of Japan, because there are some really incredible reef shots here. And can
Yeah.
you explain just what the heck coral is, or what is a coral reef like this thing?
Yeah, so a coral reef is kind of an interesting structure. So it's very confusing when people talk about coral, because when you look at coral, it usually looks kind of just like rocks and maybe sometimes plants. But coral is actually these microscopic communities of what are called polyps, and they're little organisms that work together kind of in teams. There you go. That live in spaces that they kind of eat out of the calcifications and the different types of rock that they live on. And so when you see what looks like a rock that's a piece of coral, it's not actually a living rock. What it is it's something that's coated with all of these tiny little organisms that are working together to kind of feed the community. And they usually are eating little particulates that are drifting through the water, and kind of feeding off of that. Other types of coral are more of the branching corals and things that are fan corals and other types that reach out into the water. They're much more delicate, but they're still actually just tiny little organisms that are kind of in a community that branch out. And so when we talk about coral, we're actually talking about these little guys and not the structure as a whole. That being said, there's so many different types of coral that it almost gets difficult to categorize them. So you can see just in this rock alone, all sorts of colors, all sorts of cool different structures, and but all kind of still the same base organism.
And I had this one too, which was
Yeah.
another example that all coral doesn't look the same, right?
No, definitely all coral almost looks different. It is amazing the biodiversity in coral that exists in the ocean. And the hard part is that they're actually very fragile, even though there's so many different kinds of them. Lots of them require very specific water temperatures and very specific ecosystems with certain types of fish to survive. And so when we talk about protecting coral reefs and things, there's lots of different threats that coral reefs face, and we really need them to stay alive, because all the fishes that you see that in these photos pretty much depend on the coral to exist for food and for shelter, or else none of those other fish are going to survive either.
That's funny that you say that, because it was difficult finding good shots on this Google Earth format, but a lot of those shots were of these coral farms or
Sure.
coral transplant areas. Have you seen
Yeah.
any of these before?
I've seen one before, and I've worked with some scientists that do this as their kind of full-time profession. And I see some questions trickling in, and I'll answer those in just a second. So these coral farms are really amazing. So what scientists are trying to do is kind of twofold. In some cases, they're just trying to grow lots of coral to help plant little bits of it that will hopefully spread back over communities and kind of keep coral reefs alive. But a lot of what this is, because you see that there's different species of coral here, right? There's some branching corals, there's some more flat corals, there's different colors. All of these different species are sometimes being tested to see which ones survive and which ones grow the most. So if we need coral for fish to survive in a given environment, let's say, then you want to pick a coral that's going to be resistant to changes in temperature, because right now with climate change, the world is getting warmer. The oceans are absolutely getting warmer. So we need to be able to find a coral that can live in a slightly warmer temperature than others. We want it to grow fast, because if it only grows a square inch or square centimeter in a year, it's not going to take over a reef and repopulate the reef anytime soon. And then we want it to be something that the fish are able to kind of live around and live in. And so you can also observe and see which fish tend to gravitate to certain types of coral and whether they survive with those fish being around. So testing all these different kinds of coral for which ones are going to be the best for repopulating coral reefs that have already died or bleached or had problems is something that's really important to scientists today.
We're gonna take a
Yeah.
look at some of that bleached coral that you talked about
Yeah,
when it's
I
done.
would like that.
Yeah.
To answer some questions, What kind of sharks live in that kind of bay area? So that was a Great Barrier Reef, and there are all types of sharks that live out there. Everything from things called wobegongs to great white sharks to I, I mean, all sorts of reef sharks, nurse sharks that are these kind of flatter ones that like to hang out on the bottom. Tons and tons of sharks are out there in Australia. Is the tank heavy when underwater? No, it's pretty much weightless when it's underwater. When it's above water, super, super heavy. But when you're underwater, it's pretty comfortable to move around. That's because it's filled with air, it's buoyant. So sometimes tanks actually float and you have to weight them down. How much does a water scooter cost? They can be $1,000 or more, sometimes a couple $1,000s, very, very expensive. Why do they make coral farms? I think we explained that a little bit, basically either to repopulate coral reefs that have died or to study different types of coral to see which ones are responding to certain kinds of environmental factors. Polyps eat anything from fish poop to little dead creatures to chemicals that are in the water, all sorts of stuff. And then what are the threats to coral? Water temperature changes are the big one. So right now, global warming, huge increases in temperature. You definitely get a lot of damage to coral reefs, and I think we're going to check out some bleached reefs here in a second. The second thing is actually chemical pollution from human activity. So right now in Australia, there's these huge mining operations that are happening off the shore of what's called the Great Australian Bight. And there's big coral reefs that then huge amounts of sludge and dirt and runoff go and coat over these coral reefs and unfortunately kind of choke them out. So that's a big one. And then people using lots and lots of sunscreen. If there's places where people dive and spend a lot of time in the water, there's chemicals in sunscreen that damage coral reefs. And there's been a big push, try to find responsible reef safe sunscreen if you're going to go into the ocean. There's special brands that actually say reef safe, and that's what you should be looking for.
And here's just one more example, maybe not of that direct pollution like a factory pouring sludge directly into the ocean, but there are a lot of shipwrecks all over the world and under the ocean. Some of them do kind of become new habitat for fish and other plants and animals like coral. But there's also parts like when Jeeps or when new boats with a lot of gas or oil sink into the ocean, it does leave long-term, long-lasting impacts of pollution from things like that.
Definitely.
Kind of cool graveyards to scuba dive, but definitely with ramifications involved.
Yeah. And so now there's a big trend too to having responsible shipwrecks. So actually recreational shipwrecks, which I think is really interesting. So there's governments that actually, when a ship is going to be decommissioned, they take out everything that's not ecologically safe. So all of the things that are going to break down, the plastics, the oils, and they clean them really, really well. And it's basically just the metal. And then they'll sink the ship with big holes in the side so that scuba divers can go in and around them, which is really fun.
So we've talked about scuba divers. This person right here doesn't look like they have a tank, the regulator in their mouth. What are they doing?
So they're snorkeling by the looks of it. They might just be swimming around without a snorkel. So obviously a snorkel is the little tube that we kind of use to just breathe at the surface. It's not necessary, but it just makes it easier to always kind of be looking down. Some people, you know, like what it appears this guy's doing is just kind of swimming around and taking photos. One of the things that's interesting to me, so a lot of us probably live in California where you get wave action and there's, you know, you're always kind of moving up and down when you're in the water. And so those guys look like they're really, really close to the bottom. And coral, because it's very fragile, we don't want to step on it with our fins. We don't want to damage it or knock it around, because if you break coral, you're killing the coral. And sometimes coral can be damaging to us too. So you always want to be gentle, but in these tropical areas, the water is so still and sometimes is so flat that you can be just an inch or two above the surface swimming over it, and it's never going to really drop down or touch it. So it always makes me nervous when I see those people that close to coral, but they're actually pretty safe.
So it's a good thing. It's a pro tip to kind of stay horizontal in the water, right? We're not going to step down and being careful with these big old 2-foot long fins.
Yeah.
Nice. Any other snorkeling pro tips? I thought this was a cool shot of half
That's a
sky,
great
half
show.
sea. But like,
Yeah.
how would I even get into the water if the
Mhm.
reef goes all the way up to the beach?
Yeah, so if the reef is all the way up to the beach, one thing that you can do is if you have a life jacket or something that's really floaty, then you can already be floating on the surface before when you really just touch the water, and that can help. Another thing, as you saw somebody over there had I think a kayak or maybe a small boat, but having something that floats that you can get a little bit off of the reef and then go ahead and swim around from is a great way to get out in the water. And that applies to the ocean too. If you're afraid of the waves or something like that, but you want to swim out in the ocean, you can swim in open water. It's safe and it's totally fun as long as you've kind of got strategies involved to stay near your boat and to be a part of it, or your kayak or things like that. And life jackets are a great way to do that.
Can't get over how clear the water is right now. How many
Yeah,
feet of visibility is this?
that looks like 30 or so. But that the cameras always make it seem a little bit cloudier than sometimes it is in real life. Um,
Unreal.
Yeah, there's a lot of clear water out there in the tropics.
We'll
And it's
keep on
really, really
moving.
pretty.
These were just 101 different slides to show you all the different types of corals that there are and the different formations that they have. And I really like the metaphor that they're kind of the rainforest of the ocean. They're
Sure.
responsible for like 25%, I was reading 25% of kind of marine life and biodiversity, but they are in
Yeah.
these kind of smallish pockets. It's not like this reef expands the whole length of the Pacific Ocean.
No.
Super stunning.
Yeah, they are at very specific spots, and that's also what makes them so fragile, unfortunately, is because they are in certain locations. If things start to damage those locations, because people do want to see coral reefs, and so you get lots of buildings, you get lots of communities. They tend to be kind of close to shore in a lot of cases, and so that means that people's activities just by us living on land can damage those coral reefs, and it makes them very very vulnerable habitats. And unfortunately, a lot of coral reefs are not nearly as healthy as they've ever been.
All right, I don't mean to switch back, but
No,
you
it's okay.
you said that it was safe to swim in open water.
Uh huh.
These divers right here are diving, but there are two sharks.
Yep.
I'm out. That's not safe, is it?
It is. So that looks like it's a blacktip reef shark, which is a species that I have swam with many, many times. And for the most part, you always want to have a little bit of an asterisk because animals are animals, but sharks are very gentle in terms of the overall ocean animal experience. For the most part, sharks, they're looking for fish. They're not looking for people that are the same size as them. And a lot of encounters that people have with sharks are usually manufactured experiences where they're putting, fish guts in the water and they're really trying to bring the sharks to them. Sharks, for the most part, leave people alone, and you can swim around with a lot of different species of shark. The one species that most people are, of course, rightfully afraid of is the great white shark, which is definitely a bigger and a more aggressive kind of shark. But at the same time, be aware that great whites only live in certain areas, and there are a lot of great whites who spend a lot of time around humans with no interactions whatsoever. I definitely, there's a lot of things in the ocean that I've had, safety encounters with, just whether it's weather or big waves or problems with temperature and things like that. Sharks are very low on the list for me of things to be worried about.
But sharks aren't the only predator, right?
No, they're not. Some barracuda there, huh?
These fish look kind of mean.
Yeah, they definitely they look a lot meaner than they are. I've had one chase me around inside of a lake one time. That was really weird. But aside from that, what they like to do is they like to investigate you, and they have just the meanest looking face and the big teeth that kind of stick out. And so you're kind of like, okay, I'm keeping my eye on you, and then it keeps its eye on you, and it'll just kind of follow you around, which is just the most unnerving thing. But that being said, they tend to keep to themselves all the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This next, I thought this was a really cool shot of melon-headed whales that I had not
Yeah.
heard of before.
I've never seen these guys in the wild. I'm very jealous of this photo. They're very beautiful species, and they're fairly rare. Palmyra Atoll, where this is a really, really remote area and very, very hard to get to. You'd have to take a boat way, way, way out there. So this is a very, very rare thing to be able to see. And somebody says that they look like dolphins, and they essentially, dolphins and whales are very, very similar in lots of ways. And there's a little bit of, a technical difference that I'm going to fail to identify right now. Unfortunately, I'm not a specialist in this stuff, but the line is very blurred, and these guys will look, you'll see lots of whales that honestly just look like bigger dolphins, but notice the lack of a snout.
Oh, sorry, I'll go back.
No, you're good.
There we go.
Yeah, that head is actually much more similar to a whale.
Beakless. And I think we've got a shot of a whale right here, which is our humpback whale hanging out at Cook Islands, where they come down to these warmer waters to mate, to give birth. They migrate all the way up, usually from the super cold waters of the Arctic Ocean, where there's more food and kind of nutrients in the water. But the warmer waters make for better places to have and raise babies, calves.
Yeah. And just a quick correction there. They come from
Please.
the south. So instead of the Arctic Ocean, they're down in the Southern Ocean, the Antarctic Ocean.
Thank you.
The reason that I make that differentiation is that tons and tons of whales are actually out in Antarctica, and the Southern Ocean is filled with life. And this is one of the most surprising things to me that I've ever learned, was when you go underwater in Antarctica, where the top is just ice scapes for miles, and you just see these big mountains with nothing but snow and ice. Underwater is color and biodiversity and large organisms. It's amazing. And that's partially because there's huge amounts of krill down there. So whales and all sorts of other animals can eat huge amounts of these little small kind of crustaceans that are krill, and get nice and big and fat, and then go up to the warmer waters where there's less of that, and kind of feed off of what they've eaten while they have their babies and reproduce and mate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to have a quiz coming up pretty soon, but our last slide that I wanted to share from here was one example of that coral bleaching.
Yeah. I'm glad that we could show that. So this is an interesting part of the project. I don't know if these photos specifically were taken as part of Chasing Coral, but the idea is very much the same. It's a documentary. If you haven't seen it, Chasing Coral is a wonderful documentary to check out. But you can see the difference in color, and what that is all those little organisms we were talking about, those little polyps, have left the coral. They've died off. And because of that, all that's left is the calcified structure that they were living on, which is completely dead. And so it's called bleaching just because it looks like everything has been bleached, not because it actually had bleach poured on it or something to that effect. But it's all of the animals that used to live on it basically disappearing, and all that's left is the rock. And so whereas these used to be very, very thriving environments, as the water warms, those polyps just can't survive. So you get huge ocean temperature shifts that are, and one of the arguments when people talk about climate change and like, is it real? They go, oh, well, the climate naturally varies. That's a normal thing. And it does, it absolutely does. Waters get colder and warmer depending on the seasons, absolutely. The problem is now they're getting warmer and they're staying warmer, and even the cooler parts are warmer than they've ever been. And so sometimes species would die off and only a couple would survive, but as soon as it cooled down again, they could reproduce, they get bigger, they take back over, and that flux back and forth keeps things healthy. If things stay too warm for too long, all of a sudden those last little survivors that normally would repopulate the reef, they die also, and there's nothing left to repopulate the reef during the cooler seasons. So a lot of these places are starting to become permanently damaged and dead, and because the fish don't come back, the fish aren't pooping, they're not eating, they're not dying and creating little bits of nutrients for the coral to live, and you just get a dead zone that can't really be brought back, and it's pretty dramatic, the difference. There's just not a lot that we can do. And so we're trying really hard right now to save what we can.
And I think becoming educated, or at least becoming aware that this is happening, is a good step in the right direction. As we saw from that first poll, everyone likes going to the ocean. We go to the beach, we go swimming, we go kayaking, fishing. But what's happening just under the surface and how we're positively or negatively impacting some of those changes with lifestyle choice, with different things that we do, or places that we support too. So just a good general awareness to have. So thank you for sharing on that, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
We are right at 12:30. I want to be respectful of folks' time that came out just on their lunch break as you're working hard remotely. So thank you to those of you that came, but you have to take off. Chris, if you have 5 or 10 minutes, we've got
Yeah,
a super
definitely.
fun quiz. You can stick around.
Yeah, let's stick around for the quiz, and then I'll run through any questions that are left over, and we can call it.
Bingo. Chris, you can see this ocean safari slide,
I
right?
can, yeah.
All right, good, good, good. All right, for those of you hanging out with us still, I'm gonna need you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil, or just keep track in your head. This is not graded, but we're gonna dive into an 8-question quiz on some stuff that we talked about and some that we didn't get a chance to. The first question, what is the biggest fish in the ocean? Something that you can go swim with and snorkel with in the Philippines.
And Mexico.
And Mexico. Oh, no, I haven't done them in Mexico. Last questions. Maybe this one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is a whale shark. How come it's not a whale that's the biggest fish?
So it doesn't have a blowhole. There's a big difference. It doesn't. I don't think it's not a mammal, and so it doesn't actually breathe air the same way that mammals do. So really, dolphins and whales are holding their breath. They come up to the surface and they just hold their breath while they're underwater. Whereas a whale shark has gills and actually breathes underwater and takes oxygen from within the water. What you see now, even though it looks like it's breathing, it's actually sucking in accumulations of small little fish and krill that are at the surface so that it can filter feed out what's there. So it does this big vacuum in and sucks in a bunch of water and then shoots it out. And all the little fish and stuff get stuck on kind of an internal filter that they have.
Such a cool animal.
Yeah.
Next question. Which species of shark has 3 times the number of rows of teeth than an average shark? Put 10 seconds on the clock. We talked a little bit about the gentle reef shark. The basking shark is a thing, and you may have heard of bull sharks as well. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pencils down. Correct answer is the bull shark. We don't have a good 360 picture of one of these, but bull sharks I thought are super duper interesting.
That photo, Jane Jenkins, is a very good friend of mine. Yeah.
You don't know that.
Yeah, she's one of the advisors for the Rolex program. That's hilarious. Yes.
It's way too small.
I'll let her know that she came up. Yeah, Jane Jenkins is a great diver. You should look up her photos. Lots of great photos out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, wonderful Australian woman.
She captured that shot of all that big school of bull shark. Next question. What do dolphins use to help them navigate and find food in the ocean's depths? Echolocation, X-ray, or radar? This is a good one. 10 seconds on the clock. No looking it up. No Googling the answer.
Julia P. got it in the chat. I saw that.
Nice.
Well
the
done.
correct answer is echolocation. Chris, why is it echolocation and not radar? I thought those are the same things.
Definitely not the same thing. So radar is a specific type of wave that's going to be emitted. Echolocation is specifically listening for audio waves. And it's a very similar concept, right? You're sending out kind of a wave of something, having it bounce, and then listening to what the bounce back is. But echolocation is the fact that you're using your ears and not, electronics to figure it out.
Very cool. Sound waves. Nice. The next one, a distant cousin to the shark. Which ray has an average wingspan of 25 feet and can weigh more than 5,000 pounds? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
25 feet is crazy big. That's what? 4 of me, 6 of me laying? I can't even do math right now. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pencils down. The correct answer is
Tiffany's got it.
the manta ray. Nicely done, Tiffany.
And I'm not convinced that photo right there
doesn't do justice.
Is definitely not doing justice to the size, especially oceanic manta rays. So if those of you at home, if you want to Google an oceanic manta ray right now, you will be blown away with how big that they can get, especially if you find an image next to a person.
Super cool. Question 5. What species of shark is at the top of the food chain? The saw shark, which might have like a saw bill, the great white shark, very famous, or the thresher shark, which sounds pretty
Yeah.
aggressive.
This one, I think people are going to get pretty easily.
Thanks to Jaws and Deep Blue Sea and Hollywood. If you guess the
Yeah.
great white shark, you are correct. And you've
Yeah.
actually done this kind of shark
I
dive.
have, yeah. So I've done cage diving out and helped work on a boat that was in South Australia out of a place called Port Lincoln. And I was curious to see if there's going to be a photo credit here because there's only one boat that does this kind of cage diving out in Australia under the water. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and they're actually surprisingly gentle. They're kind of just curious to see what you are. They're definitely not hunting you. They're out hunting sea lions and seals.
All right, next question. What kind of whales are famous for singing complex underwater songs? Humpback, the mink or minky? Do I pronounce the E at the end or no?
Minky, yeah.
Minky.
I
Or
think.
the beluga. 5-4, as we get a pronunciation guide for mink or minky.
Yeah, I gotta check that. Yeah, it's Minky.
And if you guessed humpback whale and not minky, you were 100% correct. And that they have this beautiful, almost eerie hum singing that they do. That if you actually like snorkel or scuba dive when they're in the vicinity, you can hear it echoing throughout the water. And it's one of the most beautiful things ever.
So we were talking about echolocation earlier. One of the reasons that works so well underwater and that humpbacks use songs is because sound waves travel much greater distances in water than they do in air. The momentum of those waves can travel through the water so much better because water doesn't compress. And so a pressure wave can continue almost for, miles and miles. What that means though is to start calling, to make a sound that travels for 100 miles, it's got to be really loud like you're talking about. And I got an opportunity one time to actually scuba dive right next to an actively singing humpback whale that was making its call. And I was pretty sure I was about to vibrate into pieces. It was so powerful that you're just like that. Yeah, and it's intimidating. It's scary, but they're beautiful creatures.
That's unreal. I didn't know you had that.
Yeah.
Question number 7, we'll fly through these last two. What is the main source of food? This is our first kind of tough question. What is the main source of food for adult green sea turtles? Is it A, jellyfish, B, small fish, or C, seagrass?
I think that shark tooth question was the hardest one. That's the only one
Bull
that I
shark?
was like,
That's true. That's true. 5-4. 3, 2, 1. We know sea turtles eat jellyfish, but their main source looks to be seagrass coming out here. And this is a really cool shot of a green sea turtle just gliding along over this reef right here, over this coral. And we can tell that this sea turtle in particular is a male because we've got a nice big tail sticking out right there. It's going to help us identify the gender of these when they're floating around. But really cool animals to go snorkeling or scuba diving with, as long as we make sure that we give them enough respectful space to let them do their thing. And let's go and do the last question. Due to its unique location and upwellings, which is water coming up from deep below, which island group is considered to be one of the most biodiverse places on Earth? Is it A, the Hawaiian Islands out in the middle of the Pacific, B, the Leeward Islands in the Caribbean, Leeward,
Yep.
or C, the Galapagos Islands over here in the Southwest Pacific, depending on where you come from. near Central America.
Yeah.
That. A, B, or C, Hawaii, Leeward, or Galapagos. That's a cool shot right there. And the seas have it. This is such a cool picture.
Yeah.
To be the Galapagos of this seal or sea lion.
That's going to be a sea lion.
How do I know?
So those kind of big whiskers give it away a little bit, but this picture's a little tough, but you can actually see ears. And so a big way to tell is going to be that they kind of have ears. They're less round. Seals tend to be a little bit more fluffy and round. And those big wingspans that they use to really dart around, as opposed to kind of smaller ones that stick up to their sides, all differentiate sea lions. But the easiest way to tell is if you can kind of see an ear, it's going to be a sea lion. And if you just see holes that are part of the body, it's going to be a seal.
Got it. Perfect, perfect. So tally up your score and see how you did. You're right. That bull shark question was a tough one.
That was a tough one. I didn't know that one off the bat.
But do follow up and do your own research and watch some of these documentaries like Chasing Coral or Blue Planet, and continue to learn more about topics that you found interesting, whether those were animals, whether those were coral, some of the fish, mammals, or the trends going on in your ocean, because it is all our ocean, trends that are going on in your ocean today. I've already taken up way too much of your time, Mr. Milburn, and everyone else's time. Thank you, Chris, for hanging out and giving us all that super good information.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
I'm going to go ahead and put those links up one more time. If you want to learn more about one specific Chris Milburn adventure, you can follow that National Geographic link to read about what he's getting up to on Mount Everest, or check out some of his photography at the link below. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and hanging out. There will be a recorded version of this video with closed captions uploaded to our YouTube channel. The link is in there as well. So you can go back or share it with other folks. And finally, there is a donation tab on the bottom because these programs have been free and made possible thanks to generous donations from folks like you. So we appreciate your generosity in allowing us to provide these free educational programs to as many people as possible. We look forward to seeing you all on Monday. We're going to be checking out Machu Picchu. You joining for Machu Picchu?
Why not? Let's do it.
There it is. We got Chris back again. All right. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your Thursday and have a good weekend.
Thank you, everybody.